We are fortunate today to have speakers in the program that are uniquely placed to debate these questions and many more and highlight the key achievements, challenges, and current situation for the audience. I take this opportunity to thank all our panelists, some of whom have traveled from far to be with us. Thank you so much.
When we come together 25 years after the genocide of the Tutsis, what is so important is to appreciate not only le devoir de mémoire, the imperative of remembrance, but
until now, preventing genocide in a sense is to really fight against impunity, arrest those people.
In what legal framework was this perpetrator oral history testimony gathered? Well, it was a legal framework, as in the case of West Germany, when Nazi killers gave their evidence.
We all know that victims, survivors, have an impact and need to be compensated or could be compensated and should be compensated. The civil law system in Europe provides, for example, that a victim can be a party to a trial.
J'aimerais vous souhaiter la bienvenue à notre ville, notre belle ville, Ottawa, et bienvenue à cette conférence internationale qui aura pour thème justice et mémoire. So, this international conference was convened as part of the 25th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi. Since April 7th, Rwandans and other friends of Rwanda took part in a series of events of Kwibuka25. In all four corners of Canada, we honored the victims of the tragedy that befell our beloved country in 1994. The younger generations were called to uphold the legacy of strength, resilience, and unity that fuel Rwanda's post-genocide transformation. I would like to invite Madame Shakila, the chargée d'affaires of the Rwanda High Commission, for her remarks. Bienvenue, Shakila.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Conference on Justice and Memory as part of the 25th commemoration of the genocide against Tutsi. We are very grateful to the Fairmont Chateau Laurier for hosting us in this beautiful Adam room. We feel at home. A particular thank you to my colleagues at the High Commission and all those who helped us to put together what we believe is an engaging program today. Our appreciation goes as well to all those who contributed to the organization of commemoration events in Canada, starting from April 7th of this year. This conference marks the end of commemoration activities in Canada, although the commemoration period will officially end on July 4th, a day that marks the end of the genocide against the Tutsi that lasted 100 days. As you know, the theme of this year's commemoration is Remember, Unite, Renew. This period has been an opportunity to remember the horrors of the genocide, but also to celebrate the many achievements that Rwanda has made in various fields, including peace and security, gender equality, economic development, and justice. Certes, beaucoup a été accompli depuis 25 ans, mais il reste des défis à relever, précisément dans le domaine de la justice, la négation du génocide des Tutsis et de l'impunité, sujets qui seront débattus pendant cette conférence. Et donc, la question qu'on se poserait est, face au crime de l'ampleur du génocide contre les Tutsis, peut-on aujourd'hui dire que justice a été rendue? Quels sont les défis, ou du moins les enjeux? Que doit-on faire pour que les criminels répondent de leurs actes? Et qu'en est-il des prévisions légales pour lutter contre le négationnisme? Knowing that there are more than 800 arrest warrants without execution, including more than 14 here in Canada, what is the status of justice? How does impunity impact justice? We are fortunate today to have speakers in the program that are uniquely placed to debate these questions and many more and highlight the key achievements, challenges, and current situation for the audience. I take this opportunity to thank all our panelists, some of whom have traveled from far to be with us. Thank you so much. Our moderators and, of course, our MC. Un merci tout particulier à vous tous présents ici d'avoir choisi de venir partager avec nous cet après-midi, riche en échanges et partage d'expériences. I'm sure we will have fruitful and rewarding exchanges in the next few hours. I wish you all every success with this important conference, and I look forward to its outcome. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
So this afternoon, with the help of our distinguished array of experts, we are here today to further deepen the reflection and discussions initiated during this 25th commemoration. The first panel will cover two issues that overlap, or should I say, cross-pollinate in interesting ways: justice provision and genocide denial. Allow me to introduce the moderator of our first session, who in turn will do the same for the speakers, Eloge Butera. Eloge Butera is a senior policy advisor to Honorable Ralph Goodell, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness for Canada. A survivor of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, Eloge has shared his experience during the genocide and the paramount role informed and engaged citizens can play in preventing mass atrocities and building a peaceful world. Eloge, please.
Vos Excellences, distinguished invités, good afternoon. It's a special honor and privilege to moderate this discussion for no less a reason, the caliber of the panelists, two of my mentors, and the importance this issue holds to Rwandans, but to the world today. So the first panelist, without ado, is the Honorable Erwin Cutler. Professor Cutler is the founder and chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and Emeritus Professor at McGill Law. He's Canada's former Attorney General and Minister of Justice and member of Mount Royal, member of Parliament for Mount Royal, and a defender of political prisoners, a human rights champion, and a personal mentor to me. So, Prof, welcome, and thank you as always for your unwavering support to the Rwandan community and to the memory of those who perished in this genocide. Please help me welcome Professor Carter. Also with us is Professor Frank Chak. He's the co-founder of the Montreal Institute for Genocide Studies. He's, by every measure, Canada's preeminent scholar on the subject. Frank is still teaching and is in Montreal in particular, the community benefits from a great deal of support from the institute he started. Frank, like myself, was with me in Kigali for the 25th commemoration. So Frank, you're most welcome. Finally, we have Monsieur Robert Petit. He is a lawyer, a veteran of the Department of Justice in Canada. He started with the War Crime Division in 2002. He is currently serving on a short-term assignment as the head of the United Nations follow-on mechanism on the DRC. He was very much involved in some of the critical cases involving Rwandans and Rwanda here in Canada. Monsieur Petit, welcome and thank you for making the time. Last but not least, our friend Diogène Bideri, who is with us from home, from Kigali. Monsieur Bideri is the legal scholar and senior legal advisor to the National Commission for the Fight Against the Genocide in the Republic of Rwanda. He has served and been involved in many files that involves justice and the memory of the genocide against the Tutsi. We are most welcome to welcome you here in Ottawa, and please ubatashya biwacu natwe turabatashya.
Akoze cyane. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm being told that I should sit down and then get this heated conversation going. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Perfect. So the questions of justice and impunity when it comes to the genocide against the Tutsis are more than an academic pursuit, because for those of us who lived through these events, it's a daily endeavor to conceive the losses, the depth of the violence, the betrayal, the breakdown of our whole society, and then to pick a path of where we go from there. I will start you with a small anecdote. After 1994, one of the first experience in a courtroom was the trial of men accused of killing relatives of mine in a town of Hyogwe, near Nyanza, in the southern province of Rwanda. I was a young boy, and I remember attending the courtroom with its chilling and cold temperature, watching these men in their green uniform of prison being questioned, examined on what had actually happened in Hyogwe to allow so many people who fled there to survive and then die. And then the bishop came to testify, and the other people came to testify, and what is in the subconscious of my mind becoming a lawyer was the ability for the cold black letter truth to land in the setting of a courtroom. In that setting, we found out how my grandmother was murdered, left in a mass grave, alive for 3 days, and then the law had to go and weigh every individual's capability in a way that, at least for the few of us who were in that room, could know what happened and see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, that at the very least the truth is on the table and somebody is being held responsible. The context of Rwanda is obviously very complicated because the numbers were such that we couldn't provide that level of individualized, meticulous justice to everybody. So I will put my first question to Monsieur Bideri to give us, to basically take us a little back in history on where we started on this journey. What has the Rwandan experience been, evolving from clerk for the Chief Justice Rugege and some of the people who were there from the very beginning. There were about 4 prosecutors in 1994 confronting mass graves and thousands of accused. So, sir, I will give you a few minutes to, I guess, take us on the last 25 years, some of the challenges that Rwanda has confronted both internally but also on the international stage. You have the floor.
Thank you, Eloge. First of all, I would like to say a few remarks to congratulate the community, Rwandan community and friends in Canada for this conference, which is really for Rwandans, but also for the international community, something which is important considering the status of justice in the world, justice against impunity in the world and against denial in general. So what I can say is that many achievements from the beginning, from the end of the genocide, are today really remarkable. I would like to emphasize the work done by the jurisdictions called the Gacaca, where people were, one, convicted, but also reintegrated after they serve their sentence. They become, I can say, no more citizens, and they are now participating to the reconstruction of the country. That is internal, but outside with the ICTR, we have many cases, 93 people indicted and 62 sentenced, and 3 fugitives now, and some cases, 3 cases transferred to Rwanda. So there is a big achievements in the recognition of genocide as an international crime, with the decision, important decision on 2006 for the judicial notice where genocide against Tutsi was recognized and can't be anymore discussed. And other cases tried in foreign countries, in Belgium, in Finland, in the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Germany, France, Canada, and the United States. Today we have some cases, people who were extradited to Rwanda. Last week, I was in court in Nyanza, High Court for International Crimes, where those people arrested, those fugitives arrested in foreign countries, now are facing justice. And it's really a good thing to see those people having the same rights as all individuals. So they have lawyers, they have time to prepare their trial and everything. So what I can say today is these achievements are completed through 25 years. But there is some there are many things to do, to achieve, but the first steps are so positive, and hope the future for those who are not yet arrested, as mentioned by the Chargé d'Affaires Shakila. In Canada, there are 14 cases, people who are at large, and in other countries where international arrest warrant was issued, 80, 100, and hope with the judicial cooperation, those people will also be arrested and face the justice. So I think until now I can stop here and let other panelists express themselves. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Professor Chak, the crime of genocide is obviously new. It's not, relatively speaking, in the course of time. But the thirst and hunger for justice is unrelenting for the survivors, for the communities that live through this. And as a historian, I have a very easy question of making some general comparison from the Europe of post-war and the search for justice that led to Nuremberg trials and others, and what you have put your mind to in looking at Rwanda and the path we've traveled over the last 25 years.
Yeah. Well, the genocide against the Tutsi of Rwanda has had a profound impact on the post-war modern understanding of genocide. The inherited texts based on the Holocaust, the Armenian genocide, and some earlier genocides like that of the Herero in German Southwest Africa, for example, emphasized the construction of empires and the elimination of people who were considered redundant or dissenters or likely subversives in such an empire. And of course, a very important factor, extreme nationalism and racism. The developments in our understanding of genocide and the tools that we can confront genocide with has been stupendous and enormous. Miraculously, the United States Congress recently passed the Elie Wiesel Act, which is 90% excellent and 10% terrible. The 90% that's excellent is all about training the American Foreign Service to give early warnings of imminent genocides, tools to prevent genocide that can be deployed, et cetera, and identifying early the warning signs and providing for opportunities for intervention. The 10% bad says that if any American is arraigned by the International Criminal Court, the Marines will go and liberate that individual. But I presume that was the price of getting President Trump to sign it, which he did do. The other option was that he was the first president to sign legislation in the dark, which was actually my first suspicion, that they said, wouldn't you like to be the first president to sign a piece of legislation in the dark? Just put your pen here and do it. And he hadn't even read it. So what we have learned from the Rwanda genocide particularly that fits into the post-war fight to prevent future genocides is, I think, most important of all, and I'll talk about this if there's more opportunity, the contribution to race hatred, ethnic hatred, of propaganda way beyond anything that we have seen since Joseph Goebbels and the Nazi propaganda machine. And a very disturbing development recently is that some of my colleagues in the academy, fellow professors, have begun to reassess the role of propaganda and of ideology in mass murder of identifiable groups, to prioritize a whole new set of factors that don't hold up very well in my view. So I'll pause there.
Yes. Prof, too many profs on the panel. Professor Cutler, the struggle for justice has been your life's work in your days as a lawyer and an academic. You were involved in some of Canada's biggest struggle to actually repatriate Nazi war criminals to Europe to face justice. But you were also among the first to actually get Canada a proper regime to deal with war crimes and prosecute genocide perpetrators. The many lessons you've taught us, those who learned from you, one of them is that the sin of impunity is actually a sign that ends up enabling those willing and looking to carry out genocide. Would you take us back in the early 2000s when, as a member of the government, you're looking at setting up the war crime process in Canada and launching some of the first cases of Canada's but some of the big initiatives to bring justice to the genocide against the Tutsis and perpetrators started under your watch. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, when I became Minister of Justice, it was with the advent also at the same time of the Mugesera case. And the Mugesera case is a very interesting case because Mugesera came to Canada in 1992 and initially sought refugee status. And the first proceedings were not in terms of any prosecution of Mugesera for any criminality, but actually claims by Mugesera for having been a victim and therefore for refugee status. But as the proceedings unfolded, and I'm encapsulating it very quickly, it moved from him being seen as a victim of atrocities to one who was a participant in the atrocities. And then his defense was, and this dovetails with what Frank said, he said, well, look, I came to Canada in 1992. The genocide in Rwanda occurred in 1994. How can I be responsible for atrocities that were committed when I wasn't in Rwanda? I was in Canada at the time. And the Supreme Court of Canada held, in a very important principle and precedent, which deserves to be much more widely known. It is known in terms of Rwanda, but I mean in a global sense. The court held that the very incitement to hatred and genocide constitutes a crime in and of itself, whether or not acts of genocide follow. And so because Mugesera had been involved in the incitement to hate and genocide, this made him, in effect, a participant in war crimes, in the incitement to genocide, and he was ultimately, deported back to Rwanda. But this was an important precedent, and making the point and linking up with what Frank was mentioning, one of the important lessons to come out of the genocide of the Tutsis in Rwanda, there are others, but one compelling lesson that has, as I said, global resonance, is that the genocide occurred not simply because of the machinery of death, but because of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and genocide. It was this teaching of contempt, this demonizing of the other, this is where it all began. And so bringing those who engage in incitement to hate and genocide to justice is not a policy option. It's a legal responsibility under the Genocide Convention, which not only prohibits acts of genocide, it prohibits incitement to genocide. And this is something that is all too often forgotten. The second case I'll mention, and with this I'll close these preliminary remarks had to do with the first prosecution that ever took place under the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act. That act was passed in 2000 with all parties in Parliament participating. It was one of my own first acts of Parliament that I co-sponsored, and that then led, though I did not know it would, when I was Minister of Justice and Attorney General, to the first prosecution under that legislation, a case in Murienza with that, for his involvement in criminal acts of genocide. And the witness testimony in his case is extremely important and compelling, because, you know, when we come together 25 years after the genocide of the Tutsis, what is so important is to appreciate not only le devoir de mémoire, the imperative of remembrance, but in fact our collective failure to prevent it. And that case and other prosecutions, I think, sets forth a lesson. With this, I'll conclude a third lesson. The first, as I said, the danger of state-sanctioned incitement to genocide. The second being the combating of impunity and the importance of bringing war criminals to justice. But the third is, and this I find the most haunting of all, that what makes the genocide of the Tutsis so unspeakable is not only the horror of the genocide itself. That would be bad enough. What makes it so unspeakable is that this genocide was preventable. Nobody could say we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. And as a Security Council, UN Security Council, and the international community dithered and delayed, Rwandans were being slaughtered and murdered. And so the dangers of indifference and inaction in the face of mass atrocity and genocide, and our responsibility to prevent and protect, is perhaps the most important of the global lessons that emerge out of the Rwandan tragedy.
Thank you, Prof. Monsieur Petit, you are a veteran of the War Crime Division of the Department of Justice. You're currently on leave. And you were there in the early 2000s when some of these first cases were being considered. Please share with us a bit of your story and those initial engagement with Rwanda.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just to make a clear point, though, I'm not on here speaking on behalf of the department or anybody else but myself. But you're right. I was there at the beginning. I also worked in different tribunals in ICTR from 96 to 99. So that's when my involvement with Rwanda started. I think from a prosecutorial point of view, I think it's fair to say that genocide cases are probably the most complex cases, criminal cases, that can be brought into a court of law. They are complex legally, factually, and even practically. And that goes for any jurisdictions that attempts to do this. It was very difficult for ICTR at the beginning. It remained so, actually, one could argue, throughout the life of the tribunal. But it's also very difficult for national jurisdictions who want to undertake these trials. And you've heard Mr. Bideri mentioning the series of jurisdictions that did this, the countries that did this. It's a very complex endeavor. Legally speaking, a genocide case, you have to remember that after Nuremberg, there was a vast amount of time that's until the ICTY, the Tribunal for Yugoslavia, started tackling mass atrocity crimes. So at the beginning of this accountability mechanism, the law was developed as it went in all the jurisdiction, and principally in ICTR, of course, which in 2006 recognized as a matter of judicial notice that the Rwandan genocide had happened, which was a very important step, obviously. But they are very difficult cases. Genocide calls for, in courts of law, a proof beyond a reasonable doubt Not only that the underlying crime happened, for example, murder, so that the person killed the other and intended to kill that person, but also with a special intent, a specific intent of genocide. You have to prove as a prosecutor, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this person murdered that other person for the specific reason that you wanted to exterminate in whole or in part members of that person's group. And you also have to remember that in genocide, you only commit genocide if you try to exterminate people who are members of only 4 groups that are protected by the Genocide Convention and by our law. So legally speaking, it's a very high threshold of proof. Factually, again, obviously, because first of all, you're talking about mass atrocities. So you're talking about a vast number of crimes that have happened over a span of time, in this case 100 days, but involving literally hundreds of thousands of victims, hundreds of thousands of perpetrators, and you have to prove to a judge or jury, again, beyond a reasonable doubt, all the factual elements that you need to support your argument that this person should be held responsible. It's even more difficult when that person is not somebody who was directly involved, for example, as a direct perpetrator, but rather an architect or an inciter or somebody who didn't get his hands dirty, if you wish. So it's even more important, more difficult if you have a case of command responsibility, let's say. So factually speaking, you are generally calling dozens, even maybe hundreds of witnesses. In Sierra Leone, my first case had 250 witnesses, and that wasn't even a genocide case. So they're factually very heavy. They take days and months of court time, and it's, as I said, a very complex endeavor. And there are also practical challenges, things that they don't teach you in law faculty. I remember that when the Belgians did their first trial, their first Rwandan trial, 2 nuns from Butare and 2 intellectuals also from Butare, which was my case as well when I was with ICTR, which was interesting. Yeah, and I went for the war crime section at the first week of hearings so that we could learn from the Belgians' experience. And one of the things that we learned is that if you were going to bring Rwandan witnesses, people in this case, a lot of older ladies, widows of the victims themselves, who had never been out of their hill, much less gone to Belgium. Well, you have to bring with them a cook, the food, a priest, and all the support system that you need so that these witnesses can and indeed are able to testify in court. Because if you brought these ladies and fed them Belgian foods, they would never make it to court because they weren't used. And if you don't have the support system to bring them into court, to explain to them how these cases are going to go, who's going to be asking questions, why, et cetera, then as one you can't do your job. So there are very complex cases, but I'm proud to say that Canada did its share with 2 cases that we can talk about more. And all throughout the world, accountability for the Rwandan genocide is still ongoing and hopefully will be.
Yes. Thank you very much. Monsieur Bideri, Rwanda has both is the Rwandan state, but the Rwandan people, there is a very commitment to the people we lost in this genocide that we won't forget them, but whenever possible, we'll seek justice for what occurred. Can you tell us a little more about the institutional building that has taken place? We know that the Constitution was changed to abolish the death penalty. We know that there were special chambers developed to handle the prosecutions to the highest global standards. What can you tell us about the changes over the last 25 years and the relationship or the expectation that where the cases can't be prosecuted overseas, they should return to Rwanda and actually have Rwandan witness justice being carried out?
Thank you. For the first time, really what I experienced in the courtroom is to face a suspect of genocide, arrested and transferred to Rwanda, see how he's organizing his defense, how testimonies, evidence are brought to court, and the feeling of the suspect before the judge, before the court. You know, it's very difficult today, for example, for survivors who were hidden during genocide. It is difficult for them to come before a judge and then give their testimonies. Many times, those who can testify is someone who was involved in genocide. And in many cases, those who are serving their sentence. They come before the judge, they can say what they know, and sometimes what I have seen is that before a judge, before the system, there is improvement. The judge is someone who is there to speak, to say law, to give rights to defense and to victims. And really this improvement. I remember for the first time when I was at university in France, to Strasbourg. So I did a lot for my research, for my PhD research in international criminal law. It was about rape and sexual crimes as a tool or weapon of genocide or weapon of war. So for me, it was really far from the reality. But it is when I was in the courtroom and facing for the first time a criminal, a suspect, who is known as a mastermind of killings and some area in Kigali, for example, in Nyamirambo sector. So being before the judge, having all rights to defend himself, having two lawyers, very strong lawyers, and facing the accusation from the prosecution. For me, that was one achievement for the Rwandan justice. Then the so-called cross-examination procedure, which was not used in Rwanda before the ICTI, but now it is used, and it is revealed many benefits to both accused and victims. So what I can say really is that with the first transferred case to Rwanda, the judicial system began to improve itself, inspiring confidence. And that is why, for example, we have seen many cases, transferred cases, extradited cases, because there is this improvement. But let me come back to the case of Mugesera, who is now in jail in Nyanza prison. But what he did, what he said, that in Argentina, it's not in Rwanda. So joking with the reality, the history of, or joking with himself. So until now, Mugesera didn't change. When he is before the judge, before the prosecution, Mugesera will say things and begin joking with the reality, with the crime he committed. I think those cases, such as Mugesera case, really it's good to know that until now, I think Mugesera didn't realize that what he did is called genocide. Even it is incitement to commit genocide, but he is, what he did really is heavy. But until now, when you visit him, when we see him in jail, when he's before the judge, he began saying things which really are not for a human being cannot be used even for defense. Mugesera, we never said that in Rwanda was genocide. And what he did was really genocide. So I don't know now the case in the Supreme Court here in Rwanda, but the argument he's using is the same he used 1992, when he was arrested in Canada, said that in 1992 he was in Rwanda and he lived to Canada. So saying this, really what I can say is that there is a lot of achievements made in the legal terms because, and we remember that someone can be tried in Canada or in another country, far from the crime scene, far from Rwanda, we have until now people, the victims in Rwanda. So judging Mugesera in Rwanda and having the court, the judicial system, respecting international standards to judge such persons, therefore is the first achievement to be right. Even the atmosphere, the environment of the court is difficult because we face some cases, the people who come to testify are people, either they participate in genocide. So they say that we killed people, more than 100 people, or one can come and testify saying that I'm a victim, I lost my family, my entire family. I was wounded and everything. So I think it is very difficult to be yourself facing the reality when you have those people. The judicial system is trying to be correct and right, respecting the international standards.
Thank you very much. Professor Chuck, you promised us to give us more elaboration on the role of propaganda and the role of hate in really laying these pillars that are the actors of incitement. Tell us a little more about your work on Rwanda, but also how these lessons are actually still reverberating in the real world today.
Thank you, Alej. In 1993, I had the privilege of visiting Cambodia, just as the United Nations Transition Authority for Cambodia was organizing the April-May 1993 elections, which were truly the first democratic elections in the history of Cambodia, which achieved a very high participation rate, largely thanks to the role of United Nations Transitional Authority for Cambodia radio, which was developed and implemented with the help of Timothy Carney of the U.S. State Department, who was the information officer of what was called UNTAC. About a year later, 94, the hate radio station in Rwanda, RTLM, was inciting listeners to hunt down Tutsi and targeting both individuals and Tutsi as a group, as well as drumming up support for the new government, which was a government totally dedicated to the murder of the Tutsi people in Rwanda. I put those two events together and began to wonder about how we could use the media, particularly radio, in countries with lower literacy rates than we have here, to combat hate propaganda, etc. And I never really thought we'd revisit the issue because it was so obvious, difficult as it is to prove in an international tribunal, that people acted because they listened to a particular broadcast. That's very hard. And I don't think there's any part of the world we can do that. But we do know the cumulative impact of propaganda. And the surest sign that it's effective is the amount of time, energy, and money which authoritarian regimes invest in propaganda. RTLM didn't just exist. It had to be invented. It needed investors. It needed a transmitter from Europe, which was duly purchased by visiting and touring various factories, etc. And it needed expert broadcasters, expert in the sense that they were very good at incitement and in bonding with their audiences. And it was a very effective radio station. However, social science cannot demonstrate a one-to-one correlation between propaganda and action. And this has opened up a gap in the chain of evidence and in the conceptual framework for giving proper weight to the role of propaganda in incitement and in the murder of people, in genocides. So into that little space has crept a whole set of new allegations coming from some very well-intentioned scholars who have got most of their evidence from interviewing perpetrators in the prisons of Rwanda and on the hills of Rwanda, where they've gone after they have been liberated following the Gacaca and other processes. And so there are four basic explanations that don't include propaganda. Briefly, they are fear. These are perpetrators speaking, ordinary perpetrators. We're not talking about the top elite killers. First is that they feared re-enslavement as serfs in a new Tutsi kingdom. So they had to kill their neighbors to prevent a Tutsi empire's recreation over them. Second, that there was pressure from their neighbors to kill their Tutsi neighbors with threats that if they did not do so, they themselves would be killed. And we know there were sometimes threats like that. They certainly existed. The real issue is how big a role those threats played. Third, ordinary killers say, well, we also killed because we felt solidarity with the patrollers, the night patrols and the roadblock people and the day patrollers, etc., but mostly the night and the roadblock people. We felt solidarity with them. They were doing hard work, and it was tough work, and it involved blood and gore, and we felt we could not just let them kill and carry the burden on their shoulders without our sharing it. And finally, we were very angry at the death of President Habyarimana, and we blamed the Rwanda Patriotic Front. We thought it shot down the president's airplane, and indeed they were told that in the propaganda. And so that's why we really killed. And briefly, my critique of these arguments relies on 5 fundamental points. First, any prosecutor knows perpetrators lie. And the first time you take perpetrator testimony and throw it into the hopper, I think we have to recognize the old insight which emerged when we started to use statistical methods in the social sciences. And that little aphorism was garbage in, garbage out. If you put tainted evidence into the evidence pool and uncritically accept it, then you are polluting the evidence base. So how seriously should we take the argument that the arguments I just stated? Second, in what legal framework was this perpetrator oral history testimony gathered? Well, it was a legal framework, as in the case of West Germany, when Nazi killers gave their evidence. in which killing because of hating the members of the group, or hating the group that the victims belonged to, drew a more severe sentence. So if you told an interviewer in Rwanda, well, I really hated the Tutsi. Yeah, they were terrible and they had to be destroyed, and I helped them to do that because they were Tutsi, and this is what I believed about Tutsi. Then you opened yourself up to even being retried, because there were cases where people were brought back into the courts where new evidence came forward. And so you would never admit that. And it was true in the courts of West Germany, too, in the cases that Christopher Browning writes about, like Reserve Police Battalion 101. Third, we know how cruelly and how sadistically the killers murdered their victims. This was true in the Holocaust, and this was true as well in Rwanda and in the Armenian genocide and others. They took sadistic pleasure in the torture, torment, and infliction of agony on the victims. And it was no accident that a victim was left to die over a period of 3 days. It was no accident that men and women were impaled with bamboo stakes. It was no accident that breasts were cut off, that noses were cut off, that feet were cut off. This is not the ordinary definition of killing. This is killing with a special zeal and a special pleasure that relates to racist myths that were projected onto those they call Tutsi. And I think it's a very important factor which my colleagues need to pay more attention to. Fourth, the education system that was created in Rwanda at the elementary school level primarily, but also at the high school level, and fewer students attended high school, starting with Kayibanda and continuing with Habyarimana, was a system aimed at stigmatizing the people called Tutsi. That system, which began every semester in every class, asking those students who were Tutsi to stand up and identify themselves before Hutu students, began the annual process of stigmatization. But that was continued in the history classes. That was continued in other classes where the history of Rwanda was taught as a history of Hutu victimization. And every problem that Rwanda encountered had its Tutsi scapegoat and had its Tutsi myth. Now, we still have much to learn through archaeological and other research about the true centuries-old history of Rwanda and its peoples. And surely there was a Tutsi kingdom. And surely there was also a Hutu kingdom. And people like Jan van Sina and others have been studying this for very many years. And we need much more work on this. But it's not just simply a history of Tutsi victimizing Hutu. And that's how it was taught. And that is the result of thought and planning by people like our friends, in quotes, the intellectuals like Nahimana and others, who in their doctoral dissertations, you can read them at the libraries here in Quebec, because they studied in Quebec, and see how they wrote their doctoral dissertations and what they say in their introductions about the approach they're going to be taken, and how Rwanda was always the victim of the Tutsi feudal lords, and the Hutu, until the revolution of 1959, were always being victimized. Fifth, the role of the short-term propaganda of Kangura and RTLM, its radio broadcasts, etc., which reignited that hatred and that scapegoating, starting in October 1990 and sometimes a bit earlier, with the RPF coming back to Rwanda to seek to overthrow the Habyarimana government, which had refused to accept the return of the refugees. It was dragging out the negotiations. Now, Elej, I can stop here. It's a natural stopping place. But if you have time, I'll talk about some of the lessons arising from this later.
Awesome. That is a perfect place to stop, and it's a very interesting place to stop, because as a survivor, in spite of spending some years in the law school, there is a very uncomfortable and uncomforting reality. Monsieur Petit, you've interviewed many of us, and there's this very interesting challenge that we know these events we've lived through. We know the neighbors we saw carry out these crimes. We know we live with the smells and the memories of living through these events. And yet, the process of law is to submit all these realities, to bend them to a very technical intentions and actions that are actually culpable and punishable by pre-established norms. The question I have for you is, looking at this, and it's a very terrible question to put to a prosecutor, really. Why am I constantly discomforted by the fact that a scholar comes out and say, it's only genocide in these technical terms that a certain judge in Arusha decided, but the breakdown of our own society and the bodies that we are still burying to this very same day is set aside in basically reaching that conclusion. Diving deep into really the question of denial, notwithstanding the conclusion in 2006, the notice by the ICTR, or the very fact that you have to go to the ICTR to actually source that conclusion, as opposed to hundreds of trials that happened in Rwanda. Can you tell us more about, I guess, this process of evidence, turning lived stories into evidence that leaves people like me discomforted by the easy leap that has been made in diving towards denial and revisionism? An easy question.
Sure. I think one of the first things you learn as a prosecutor is to respect a survivor's way of dealing with what happened to him or her, and that your obligation, your first and foremost obligation, is to be very frank about what you can and cannot do, and what the judicial process can and cannot do. I can't tell you how to live your grief. Nobody can. I can only do, and that's what this judicial system does, it's a very small part of the answer, especially when it comes to post-conflict. When we're here in Canada, we know the purpose of a criminal trial is to establish what happened to that person or these persons, sometimes when there's more than one victim. When you're talking about hundreds of thousands of victims, and as I said, a breadth of time and geographical space, it's even more important to remember that if a trial is well conducted, if the best evidence is brought forward, if the most sound legal arguments are made, if everyone does their job correctly, then the ultimate goal is to establish the truth of what happened. With that truth, then the prosecutor, the judge, the defense lawyers, all these are then irrelevant. What happens in post-conflict, what happens after a society goes through what Rwanda has done, is that everybody else, those scholars, those psychologists, the politicians, the sociologists, the therapists, etc., etc. But first and foremost, the survivors can know what happened. That judgment is the proof, is the truth, right? It's proven beyond a reasonable doubt what has happened. I think we in the judicial field, sometimes we forget the limits, our limits. We forget what we're good for and what we shouldn't try to do. In mass atrocity crimes, yes, you do establish an historical record to some extent, but we're not historians. But we have to tell what happened, generally speaking, and why it happened to make sense of it for the judge or the juries to understand, to put into that particular frame of reference the specific elements, as you've just mentioned, that we have to bring forward. You do have to ask these survivors to relive the worst moments of their lives. That's true in any criminal trial. Sometimes even more so in these mass atrocity crimes, and especially when you're talking about the jurisdiction, as you mentioned in ICTR, where these people were brought out of Rwanda in a completely different and foreign context. And again, ask to relive those moments. But that's the essence of the process. Now, sometimes victims will feel that by doing that, they are, in some sense, stopping to be a victim. They are taking back control a little bit about what happened to them, especially when they face a direct perpetrator. That's something that I've seen in Rwanda, and I've seen in East Timor, in Sierra Leone, in Cambodia, here. Okay? Victims who agree to participate, as I said, internalize and use that process in an everyday way, but sometimes, as I said, it helps them stop being a victim and to take back control a little bit about their narrative, about what happened to them, and to see an end result, which is the judgment. You have, again, to be very conscious as a prosecutor that you're not there to solve problems that go beyond evidentiary or legal problems. You're just there to help the process, which resides with the judge, of establishing, if you can, beyond a reasonable doubt, what happened. It's a small part of the healing that an individual or a nation has to go through. I believe it's fundamentally important, though. I believe, as I said in various different contexts, and your question was put to me in various languages in 5 different settings, but it's the same question. Why should I bother? Why are you spending all that money to do this? Why should I participate in this? It's not going to bring back my father. It's not going to bring back my sister. Why should I do this? And I happen to believe that the rule of law and accountability, especially for the worst crimes possible, is the cornerstone on which you can then rebuild something solid. As I've told other people who've asked me that question, why it's important? It's important because if we don't prosecute the worst crimes, then what you're building on is not going to be solid. If I give you a cow, why does it matter if your neighbor knows and believes that tomorrow he can come and steal that cow and he's going to get away with it because there's no justice? And how can you teach your kid that it's wrong to steal the neighbor's kid's bicycle if he knows when he grows up that genociders are walking the streets and have never been held accountable? So it's a very difficult process. It solves some of the issues, but it's a fundamentally important one. But because of its importance, it has to be done correctly.
Yeah. Professor Cutler, how do we, and you spent your life training lawyers and judges and people of this profession, how do we confront these intense moments of truth with the burden of also confronting denial? Because as we have learned in other places, it's the last violent act towards a survivor and the memory of a genocide victim.
You know, as I was listening to my fellow panelists, and now your question about confronting the truth and genocide, then I realized something that I had not always appreciated before, and that was the importance of the whole Rwandan Tutsi genocide in my own life. I mean, I've spoken about the question of the genocide of the Tutsis elsewhere as being, of horrors too terrible to be believed, but not too terrible to have happened. And Frank was describing some of those, horrors so graphically. But when I first became, I won't go into an accidental member of parliament in a by-election in '99, but a reporter asked me a question, and he said, why did you decide to run? Was there anything that decided you to run? And the answer blurted out. And I said, Rwanda. And he looked at me and he said, Rwanda? And I said, yes. I said, because if any horror like this ever happens again, I want to be on the inside, trying to be able to prevent it and combat it rather than on the outside and looking on as the horrors unfold. Because I could never get over the fact about the indifference and inaction. And so I felt that the importance of appreciating our individual and collective responsibility at all times in matters of this nature, the responsibility to prevent and to protect and to act. And that's why my whole parliamentary career was involved afterwards in Darfur, in the humanitarian and criminal catastrophe in Syria, and just again this morning, where I participated in trying to get finally Parliament to move on the genocide of the Rohingya in Myanmar, where at this point, as we meet, there are some senators that are blocking a motion to go ahead and bring Myanmar, a state party to the Genocide Convention, before the International Court of Justice, after, to Parliament's credit, it unanimously recognized that there was a genocide of the Rohingya, but from moving of making a declaration to acting upon it and combating the culture of impunity in Myanmar, because we've not brought the perpetrators to justice. Even with regard to Rwanda, and I think the Department of Justice in Canada has taken this seriously, but the resources they have are insufficient for the purpose that needs to be accomplished. The Department of Justice, and in particular war crimes, needs far more resources because of, as Mopedi has described there, the evidentiary issues, legal issues of a complex character and the like. And we've got to bring together the necessary resources, otherwise we're going to be indulging a culture of impunity. So we have to make the whole question of the preventing and the combating of mass atrocity and genocide a priority on our justice agenda as a matter of principle and policy. I would like to see us adopting here an Elie Wiesel legislation regarding early warning systems and the like, without the ICC reference.
The Marines, right?
Yeah, the Marines arresting people from the...
Use Marines for better purposes.
And the final thing I would say is the pain of what you mentioned, Elijah, in your question, of genocide denial. I mean, this is something that, we experienced with regard to the whole question of Holocaust denial. Basically, what this involves is killing the victims a second time. And when you have this cruelty of genocide denial, you're actually accusing the victims of having perpetrated and advanced the notion of a hoax, as in the case of the Holocaust, or false crime, as in the case of the genocide of the Tutsi. We have to unmask and expose these bearers of false witness for what they are. This is the most cruel form of propaganda, this genocide denial. And that's why, whether it be the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, or the Gacaca cases, or the entire process of bringing war criminals to justice, it's part of the combating of genocide denial, because the witness testimony, the evidence, the pleadings, each one of them is a testimony to the falsity of genocide denial and to the affirmation of truth. And this is what I think that those of us involved in the justice system must always be engaged in, as I said, as a first priority in the pursuit of justice, and that is the preventing and combating of mass atrocity and genocide.
Thank you, Prof. Monsieur Bideri, you are part of an institution whose mandate is not only to fight against genocide, but also to preserve the evidence and the records of what occurred. Before I get to the audience to give them a chance to weigh into this conversation, I want you to share a little bit some of the work you are doing to repatriate the records of the ICTR, which is an important thing, and other efforts your organization is engaged in by ways of really ensuring that new generations of Rwandans, recently I was told that 3/4 of Rwandans are under the age of 30. So it is important to all of us that we preserve these memories. So please share with us a few of your thoughts on that issue.
One thing I have to say is that facing this genocide denial in the world, facing deniers who use really arguments based not on the reality but on construction of arguments which are built with the intent to destroy the reality of genocide perpetrated against Tutsi. So the effort were put on the keeping the conservation of evidence. You know, there are memorial sites, genocide memorial sites, more than 200 memorial sites in the entire Rwanda. But Rwanda began in 2012 to put some of genocide memorials to request the UNESCO to put them on the World Heritage list. Those 4 memorials are Gisozi Memorial, Nyamata, Bisesero, then Murambi. So the process is ongoing, and I am happy to be the coordinator of this initiative, where really we face solidarity with other member states of UNESCO, which support this initiative to see that some of the memorials are inscribed on the list of the World Heritage, and we think that this will be a strong message to fight against the denial, because doing this, recognizing this, and putting them on the World Heritage list, it is something which is beyond the national effort, but it becomes the international and the obligation of the human being, whatever they are, wherever they are, so to put effort to the conservation of those evidence. Second is to scan, to conserve the soft copies of Gacaca records. It is a huge of papers of court decisions, testimonies. So now we finished to scan all those papers. We began the indexing of those records to make them accessible to the researchers or for justice purpose. And also doing so we encourage people, institutions, to write the local history of genocide. You know, in every village there were killings, and there were perpetrators and victims. So we began with the former prefecture or 10 prefecture. Now we have 4 publications on the killings on those 4 prefectures, and we want to go beyond and cover the 10 prefectures. But what I can say is this effort, while we're doing effort to consult evidence, we saw that people are putting effort to destroy those evidence. Let's speak and say, one, how can a genocidal or suspect genocidal be safe, be normal citizen, and be protected by law? Why those people are not arrested? If we say, for example, in Canada, there are 14 people at large, so everyone knows that they are there. So one of the things, beyond all initiatives, good initiatives, until now, preventing genocide, in a sense, is to really fight against impunity, arrest those people. Second, it is that some people, known people, let's say some example, for example, Judy Rever, who really published, so the publications of Judy Rever, when you read them, is sort of propaganda, destroying the reality of genocide. But how those people, deniers, such as Judy Rever, how those people can be so comfortable and not being accountable of their publications? We know that denial in some states, in France, Belgium, now, or Luxembourg, denial is punished, it's a crime. How this can be tolerated in some countries? For example, let's say in Canada, how Judy Rever can publish in the price of blood and continue to this propaganda, because in certain form it is protecting genocide, saying that there was double genocide, and how this can be the link between genocide denial, prevention of genocide, and prevention of genocide denial. I think this, so this opportunity to speak about genocide, about denial, so has to bring us to see how to face this kind of denial, putting in place some laws, punishing really and taking seriously denial as a threat to peace, to rights of people. Because denying genocide, as it has been said, it is the last stage of genocide. So together, I think, can assess and take measures in way to prevent genocide, punishing genocide denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Bideri. I will now take a few questions from the audience. Can you share with us your name and then...
Yes, my name is Godlove Ngofusi. I'm on behalf of Atona Media Group.
Okay.
Responsibility to protect. Professor Cutler. The Holocaust was a truly heinous act of human depravity. We, as members of the international community of conscience, swore that it will never happen again. Never again, we intoned. But then it happened again in Rwanda. While we stood by and watched, we failed again. Today, genocide is happening elsewhere in Africa, again, while we stand by and watch. The world has its collective hand or head permanently lodged in the proverbial sand. What is it going to take for us as humans to live together as co-tenants in this global community we call our global village? We see right now, again, we're turning a blind eye and our hearts to the ongoing acts of massive genocide being prepared in the Western world by the groups of racial, quote-unquote, supremacy. It's happening through propaganda, fake news, and what have you. And once again, we're going to stand by and watch and say never again until it happens again. What do we need to do to forestall these things and eliminate them once and for all? Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you. So, what do we do?
Well, as you stated, what was intended to be a statement of not only recognition but action, namely never again in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust. What has happened is that never again has become yet again, again, and again, and again. And that's why I was referring to, as we meet the genocide of the Rohingya, and yet not one of the perpetrators is being brought to justice in terms of the culture of impunity. So when you say what then can be done, I believe that, and when the reference was the Elie Wiesel legislation in the U.S. Congress at this point, we do need to begin with education. One of the problems is, for example, amongst young people today, the numbers that have never heard even of the Holocaust, and one would even say more increasingly also about Rwanda, particularly when genocide denial is taking place. So the importance of education, of raising awareness, and this brings me to the second point of the responsibility for taking action. The whole notion of the responsibility to protect doctrine, which was also violated more in its breach than its observance, was that if in any time war crimes, crimes against humanity, or God forbid genocide is taking place in any country, and there is, and in that country, the government is unable or unwilling to do anything about it, or worse, as in many of the cases we have mentioned today, the government is the perpetrator of that criminality, then there's a responsibility on behalf of the international community to intervene and protect the innocent, targeted civilians. Regrettably, the R2P doctrine, while adopted unanimously in 2005, both the UN Security Council and the General Assembly, continues to be met more by a breach than by observance. And we have a situation, therefore, as taking the case of Syria, that those of us who felt at the time, back in 2011, that what was happening in Syria were daily commission of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and called on the international community to intervene. In other words, to implement the R2P doctrine. We're told, well, if you intervene, this will lead to sectarian warfare, this will lead to civil war, this will lead to jihadists coming in. Everything we were told would happen if we intervened happened because we didn't intervene. And so the responsibility, therefore, to prevent and protect has to be a fundamental principle and policy, and the community of democracies have to take the lead today. And regrettably, what we are seeing is the retreat of democracies in the face of a resurgent global authoritarianism, massive assaults on human rights, as I say, the retreat of democracies, an increasing number of political prisoners as a looking glass into these atrocities. So the community of democracies, the international community, must take their own responsibilities seriously. Civil society must be engaged and call on the democracies to act. Regrettably, as the Prague, and with this I'll close, the Prague Declaration on Democratic Renewal said 2 years ago, that democracy is everywhere under threat, from without and from within. And those who care about democracy must come to its defense.
Thank you, Prof.
But I tend to take the long view and to be slightly optimistic. I think accountability for mass crime, as R2P, is here to stay as a principle, as a foundational principle for most states. The ICC, despite its current turmoil, let's say, well, I think turmoil is probably a bit exaggerated, but is here to stay. It's an institution that 122 now, I think, countries have said, yes, we will account for mass atrocities. Or if we don't, this institution will. When I got to Cambodia in 2006, nothing had been done for the 1.4 million dead Cambodians 30 years before. So it took 30 some odd years for something to happen. In Syria, despite the political context which makes perhaps other actions impossible, the international community, the General Assembly, created a mechanism specifically to gather evidence to be used eventually against perpetrators of the crimes being now still committed in Syria. So something was done. As I said, I take the long view, but I think we have to recognize that there is a movement, there is a dynamic here that ebbs and flows in accordance with the political will, but I think is here to stay, I hope.
Yeah. Speaking of the political will, Professor Chuck, you once wrote a book about the will to intervene.
I helped to write it, yes. I was a co-author. You know, in a way, it's ironic. We have lawyers here on either side of me. We ought to have generals, we ought to have economists, we ought to have development people, and you guys, you should be coming at the end when they've all failed, instead of being here like me right at the front. And I shouldn't be here either as a historian, because we shouldn't have these cases to write about. So why do we have us here? You know, because let's face it, folks, we're all you got. We are all you have. And that's a pretty thin reed, because accountability after genocide and ending impunity after genocide, that's great, but that means we failed. And I'm not so sure we've discouraged the Burmese generals. I'm not sure we've discouraged ISIS. I'm not sure we've discouraged all these other people. That's why we're talking about the Rohingya and others. So how do we get out of that? How do we implement R2P? So periods like this, it's like we're in the middle of the Depression of 1929 when it comes to R2P. Are periods to be used exactly as we're doing here, to reassess, plan ahead, as Robert was suggesting, look at the long term, think about the institutional framework so we can put them in place when the winds change direction, societal winds, etc. But also, I mean, the things that we know we need to prevent future Rwandas as well as future Holocausts are institutions devoted to monitoring the media, to give early warning of incitement to commit mass atrocity crimes. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum issued a handbook on combating genocide 2 years ago, maybe. And I very carefully looked at what they said about radio broadcasting. And this is exactly where the errors in the literature come into the practical applied prevention measures. So yes, jamming radio is in the handbook, but it's not in the stage that precedes the genocide. It's in the stage in the handbook when the genocide has already started. And that's one stage too late with lethal consequences for the victims. It needs to be in that stage where we have picked up the early warnings, we've identified the hate newspapers, the hate radios, the hate internet sites, etc. And that's when we need to act, before we have 500,000 dead.
Yep.
Second, we need a new protocol in my own discipline of history for interviewing perpetrators or alleged perpetrators. Right now, we operate under the principle of the Hippocratic Oath for doctors. Above all, do no harm. So when you interview a survivor or a witness to important historical events, the first principle is, and you have to sign a very rigorous, make very strong promises along these lines before you're allowed to do the interviews if you're coming from a university. Above all, do no harm to the witness. Do no harm to the survivor. And that means, first of all, usually we accept that testimony without challenging it, because you don't want to re-inflict damage on the person giving you the testimony, even when you know it's wrong. So we have Holocaust survivors who tell us all about things that happened at Auschwitz that never happened at Auschwitz, that we know never happened at Auschwitz. But we don't say to them, that's not true, you read that in a book, I know what book that came from, and that book is totally wrong. We don't do that because that would be to re-traumatize the person. And this is supposed to be a contribution to the record. And some stuff stays in the record and some is winnowed out because it simply has no basis in fact. So the new protocol for interviewing perpetrators would be a protocol which says when you're interviewing a perpetrator, the first thing you do when you sit down is to say to that person exactly what the Miranda warning says. Not only do you have a right to have a lawyer, but anything you say may be used against you, including lying. And in that way, we put on notice the people giving us testimony. Not only the obvious point, but a less obvious point, which is that in prisons, there is a recreation of society where the citizens of the prison, the inmates, collaborate with each other, and particularly in Rwanda, this has been a problem. They conspire with each other to help each other satisfy the regulations and laws pertaining to how you get out of jail. So one prisoner will make up a confession that won't necessarily exonerate another prisoner. It will say, for example, if this week you can get out of jail because you admitted you only killed 2 people, not 10 or 20, that I only saw you killed, we all know you only killed 2 people. And then you'll be eligible to get out earlier for time served. And the person who is favored by that false testimony then will say reciprocally for the other person, well, and in your case, you weren't in that village, you were not on that hill, you were drinking beer with so-and-so. I know that because I was there. So there's a whole book about this, which has been out now for over 10 years. And nobody doing the interviews is paying serious attention to this. So we need a new protocol which also takes account of the sharing of false testimony among prisoners within the prisons.
Prof, before I get to the second question, Dr. Bideri, the name of the commission is the Commission for the Fight Against Genocide. Is a Rwandan aware of the Pan-African ambition of Rwanda today? Are there plans and thought to actually expand the mandate to carry out the fight against genocide continent-wide?
There is on the ICGRR, International Conference on Great Lakes region, which is a regional organization based in Bujumbura. So there is a protocol on prevention of genocide and other mass atrocity crimes with 12 member states. And this protocol on prevention of genocide, the initiative, the input came from Rwanda from the experience of Rwanda. But again, coming back to this R2P, briefly I can say that, as expressed by other panelists, so really when there is signs or reports on mass crimes, mass atrocious crimes committed by a government. We have examples where UN or other regional organizations, such AU, African Union, for example, on some situations in neighboring countries where people are being killed. So what victims are expecting from the international community is really to be present there and to intervene. But reports are made by those international bodies, and there is no response, concrete response. I think R2P is a good principle and can be useful when states are taking seriously their international responsibilities. When they signed the 1948 Convention on Prevention of Genocide, the punishment of genocide, it is about these international obligations. But what we see, why crimes are committed, for example, in neighboring countries, such in Burundi, let me say it, because there were reports, and states, the international community is so quiet. There is no any intervention. Why? Because I think there is sort of interest, international community with interest. When there are interest, one, states cannot intervene because they have interest, or they don't have any interest, then they will never intervene. So what I can say is la communauté des intérêts. When this communauté des intérêts will see to be only communauté des intérêts, mais aussi une communauté de protection, et qui peut, à travers l'usage même de la force, the use of force with the legality, with the UN Security Council approval, then I think where there are signs and where the state fails to protect its own citizens, then the international community will intervene. But until now, this will is lacking, the will of states to intervene. And until this is not taken seriously, I think killings will be committed, and there will be talks, will be meetings in the UN Security Council, but there will not be any intervention. So it is what I can say about this R2P. Thank you.
Merci. A question on this side. Yves.
Thank you. My name is Yves Bahizi. I'm a resident here in Ottawa, and I'm a survivor of genocide. So I wanted to ask a question. I don't have a specific panelist to answer this question. Anybody can take a crack at it. It is about the compensations of survivor of genocide. Professor Cutler has beautifully indicated the responsibility or the lack of responsibility of international community. in terms of genocide that took place in our country, but you do not understand that lack of responsibility when you don't put it into context. I'm going to give you like 2 examples. One is the situation of Eto Kwibuka25. Every survivor of genocide remembers vividly how some of the members of mission of observation, UNAMIR, during the genocide that were there, how they abandoned the victims of genocide and then left them into the hands of the killers. And when they were actually taking their own, loading like the trucks and leaving, when they actually turning the corner towards the international airport of Kigali, I mean, the first victims were being killed by the killers. So that was, and that example actually, it's kind of personal to me because I grew up not very far from that area. Second example is another location I call the Kindera, where we have like a mental hospital there. That one is personal to me as well because I did my high school not very far from there. So anybody could go on YouTube and see the footage of the victims imploring, begging the soldiers of UNAMIR, MINUA, right? Because we're telling them, don't leave us, because you can see the killers not far from here, right? They're going to kill us, right? They decided, I mean, to leave them. So that shows the magnitude of international community failure. So now, when you talk about responsibility, I mean, there has to be some kind of consequence to responsibility. So the compensation of victims of survivors of genocide. It's been 25 years. What has been done so far? We are all aware of the situation of survivor of genocide in Rwanda. We have thousands of widows living in inadequate housing, living in houses crumbling on them. We have even like victims living with physical, psychological consequences of genocide, with inadequate healthcare system. So we are, I guess on behalf of other survivors of genocide, I want to know how to hold international community responsible, what has been done so far in the last 25 years, what is the obstacles, what is hindering, I mean, that compensation to become a reality, and what are the strategies in place to ever have that compensation to the victim of genocide, because they can use that financial support.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Yves. This is an important question that I will give you a fair warning, Dr. Bideri, because you will get the last word on the question about what is actually happening on the ground in Rwanda. But I will start with you, Monsieur Petit, because the criminal law doesn't always cover the question. but the survivors, the witnesses you had, and the framework as it exists in the international arena leaves this question a little bit hanging about what exactly is going to happen in terms of les dommages or any pecuniary compensation that is owed to the victim. How do we start thinking through the question and what is actually happening with the law?
Well, I would say that the thinking and will to do something about it. ICTR, the founding statute, calls for the setup of a trust fund, a victim trust fund, in which countries were supposed to voluntarily contribute to, and then the ICTR would administer it and would provide various outcomes for survivors. I don't think much has been done on that front. I don't think much money has been contributed, and if I remember correctly, very little has been done on the ground for it. We all know that victims, survivors, have an impact and need to be compensated or could be compensated and should be compensated. The civil law system in Europe provides, for example, that a victim can be a party to a trial and then with the judgment civilly can get some compensation financially from the perpetrator or and that has been translated into international proceedings now. The ICC has victims' participation, and there's a victim trust fund there set up as well. But there has to be money to be given out. And who contributes to that money? If it's not mandatory for countries to do so, then it's their willingness to do so, and if not, then it's judgments against the assets of an accused. All my, as far as I know, except maybe Bemba, all accused in all the international trials that I've been part of have all been indigent, or at least claimed to be and be deemed to be indigent. So the issue is known, the means to address it is known. What lacks, I would suggest, is the willingness to do so, and that's beyond my pay grade.
And Professor Chuck, we know from the lessons of the Holocaust that there was obviously a systematic plan to acquire the properties of European Jews and build wealth on those bases. In the context of companies that are actually enabled to get machetes in the hands of Rwandans,
yes.
What is known from your work?
Let me say a
and
word
what can
about
be done?
compensation and about the accomplices, you might say, or complicity, before, during, and after the fact. West Germany pioneered, the government of West Germany pioneered compensation and restitution for victims of the Holocaust, or let's say genocide generically. And why did it do it? It did it largely because that was the price West Germany's government understood under Konrad Adenauer that it must pay for readmission to the community of civilized nations. Simple. Nobody was going to take West Germany seriously as a state, which in the context of the Cold War was vital, unless it showed it had some moral authority that went together with its sovereignty. And the path to moral legitimacy and sovereignty lay through compensating some of the victims of the Holocaust, first in relatively modest ways, and also giving funds and arms to the State of Israel, which symbolically represented and also practically many times represented the victims of the Holocaust. Nobody sued the government of West Germany effectively before they did it. Very little property stolen from Jewish victims and their families was restituted prior to this. And even today, that's a big, big, big struggle. So I remember speaking with William Schabas when all of this was just beginning, and I mentioned compensation. And Bill's first reaction, I'm sure he would agree, was, where's the money going to come from? And I think Robert has given a very good summary, if you all got it. Confiscate the assets of perpetrators. Some of them are wealthier than others. And then, if France, Belgium, and other countries want to have ongoing moral authority, we need to remind them that there is a little gap in their moral authority for ordering their troops away from the protection mission they were there to implement, and leaving the victims to the perpetrators' devices. The main point, I think, is this. Before the Holocaust, I do not know of a single example of compensation to victims of mass atrocity crimes like genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, serious war crimes. So the door was opened in the aftermath of the Holocaust, and there has been some compensation at a very low level. But I think this is maybe this is one of the major legacies of the survivors of the Rwanda genocide and the government of Rwanda. It's really governments like the government of France, the government of Belgium, particularly, who withdrew their troops or gave orders to their troops in Turquoise. It's true Turquoise did save some people, and Carol McQueen has written about that in her book. But largely, theirs was not a rescue mission, except to rescue the leaders around Madame Habyarimana and the Akazu. So I think this is a cause which the survivors and their heirs, in the case of Rwanda and the Tutsi genocide, might very well spearhead in both senses.
Yeah. Prof, there's so many lessons to learn about how you actually put these institutions in place when you really look at the spectrum of justice. There's the administrative law. When people like Mugesera end up here, you need to actually use those tools to get them.
Could I just take a second to add an example that occurred to me?
Yeah.
In the case of Yugoslavia, one of the key translators for the Dutch battalion at Srebrenica saw his younger brother and his father being led onto a bus that would take them under the authority and control of the Srpska Republika killers out of Srebrenica. And he intervened, and he said to the Dutch battalion officers, "That's my father, that's my brother. I don't want them to be killed. If they get on that bus, the odds are they're going to be killed as men and boys. Get them off the bus. Save them." And they refused. The Dutch soldiers refused. And he then went to the Netherlands, and he brought charges in a civil suit against the officers who had committed that action. It would be an advertent omission to act to protect the lives of these potential victims. And he won. He won. He won in the first instance, and he won on appeal. And indeed, he received financial compensation for the deaths of his father and his brother.
Yeah.
And so there may be another possibility there as well. And he's a very good guy, and he would be happy to share his experience.
So in the same vein, I guess, the question I have for you, Prof, is how do you build a bit of a Swiss Army knife of justice to be able to tackle administrative questions about immigration, criminal law justice issues that are very serious, and then the civil law issues that are really, I think, in thinking broadly about what this compensation means, is not only the goods that were taken away, but also opportunities lost.
Yes.
Where do we start?
You know, I think Frank mentioned with West Germany, that's almost the paradigm model of a country undertaking to restitute the victims and survivors, and doing so in multiple ways. That did not happen as much as it ought to have happened with regard to other countries. In fact, I wrote a law review article about 22 years ago called Thefticide, in which I sought to demonstrate how the European countries not only did not compensate the victims, but in fact profited from the victims. And that even today, both the countries and citizens of those countries are in possession of property, in possession of art, etc., which still belongs to the victims and their families, and has never been restituted. That's on the Holocaust. On the matter of Rwanda, to me, it's always been a shocking example, because the Security Council dithered and delayed while Rwandans were dying. And I felt then, and wrote about that as well, that the United Nations owed an obligation of restitution to the Rwandan survivor community because of the inaction of the UN and its institutions in multiple ways, which ended up resulting in the atrocities and mass murder of the Tutsis of Rwanda. So I think we have to create a framework with respect to bringing about that compensation, whether it is in an international level through United Nations responsibility, whether it is with respect to country responsibilities, and as a result of international criminal tribunal mechanisms setting up and building into it compensation responsibilities, or where it is done through cases in private law that you mentioned, some of which have been undertaken and are undergoing as we meet, in terms of restitution of art and restitution of property and the like. So I think it's a mix, really, which engages all the various areas of law and intergovernmental, governmental, and individual responsibilities.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Bideri, you have a few minutes to summarize 25 years. What is happening now, and how can we help?
Yeah. Thank you. I think 24 years is not enough, but it's a lot of time, I think, for our survivors to get new way to live, to overcome the difficulties, the consequences, immediate consequences of a genocide. Unfortunately, Rwanda couldn't wait a lot from international community to participate to this compensation. One, because when the ICTR was established in 1994, so the lack of this provision on compensation, the statute and the rules of procedure only refer to a national jurisdiction when there is a conviction of a genocide. So lacking to put on this provision really was lack of chance to begin to get a fully reparation of what the loss of survivors. Secondly, Rwanda put on a fund, in French, Fonds d'assistance pour les rescapés du génocide, FARG, to assist survivors in many areas for education for orphans and assistance of widows, health matters, and housing. And it is funded 100% by the national budget each year. So there was a tentative of creating, establishing of a trust fund. This was supported by Ivuga, the umbrella of Survivors Association. It is under discussion. But really, I think there was a lot of support given to survivors. Now they are orphans, the young who were young when the genocide was being perpetrated. Now they are adults, so they were at school, they are working, they got a job. So I can say that the tendency is the normalization of life of survivors. Give them means to live and support themselves. The initiative of Rwanda to set up this fund, there was benefit. Instead of expecting from outside this aid or support, because it was lacking. Turning to responsibilities of some countries which were in Rwanda and didn't intervene to stop or to save people, I think we can say that it was said by Professor Chuck, Belgium and France. So normally, to establish the responsibility, we have to file cases before the ICJ, International Court of Justice. But we know that it will take time to bring states before international justice. Or some cases, there's a limitation. We can't spend time and money bringing those countries before international justice. And where people try to bring people, individual, before justice, for example, in Belgium, the widow of the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ngurinzira Boniface, she filed a case against the Colonel Marshall, who was in Kigali and who played a role in the withdrawal of the Belgian contingent. But the justice, now the case is ongoing. There's no any decision taken. But really, those individual initiatives must be supported as a symbol of the failure of the international community, because the compensation will be, you cannot repay the death, the loss of people, but you can contribute to the welfare of these survivors, and there are many ways to do it, and I think it is through justice, through diplomatic way or other means, or funding projects, specific projects for survivors, which can really bring people think that the justice was complete. I think penal or criminal side, there is a success. But in civil terms, I think there is a lot to do. If it was not done, it can be done for future cases, for people who are tried before a national jurisdiction. And I know that it's not easy for this compensation, even if there is a responsibility. We know that there is a collective responsibility of inaction to do something. We can hold the entire community responsible, but I think it's something which can be done when there is this sort of will of states to take their responsibilities and to contribute to reparation in a way for projects, for a specific project for survivors. Thank you.
Mr. Bideri, you have about 30 seconds for a few last words from Kigali on our panel.
So one thing I have to say is that I am happy to see you all. No, I don't see everyone, but I saw that the conference really is successful, and hope this will contribute to further reflection on how to prevent genocide, but specifically Kigali, it's night 10:30 p.m. So I'm going straight to bed. Hope you're enjoying your conference, and tomorrow probably I will be informed that the end and the commission recommendations. So I salute everyone. We were happy to be so facilitated by this technology to see people laughing, but also contributing to be this community of human beings in order to prevent other mass atrocity crimes. Thank you, and murabeho muramuchi.
Merci beaucoup, on est ensemble.
Okay, thank you very much.
To my co-panelists, anyone can use 30 seconds to say a final thing.
We are going to need several bills, not just one. And I hope that Erwin and I, at least, maybe others here, can work on a Canadian version of the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity Prevention Act of the Parliament of Canada.
Yeah, I join in that, because I think that kind of legislation would have all the ingredients of which we were speaking about today: the importance of education, the importance of awareness, the importance of remembrance, the danger of indifference and inaction, the danger of cultures of impunity, the responsibility to act and protect. All these things can come together in a process that both moves that kind of legislation, adopts it, and then it resonates throughout the community.
And the first clause says the Government of Canada recognizes that the prevention of genocide is a national interest of the Government of Canada.
Monsieur Petit.
I concur, and I want to thank the organizer for this privilege.
Thank you so much, everyone. I will just leave you with one final word. 25 years ago today, me, like many of you, were hiding in the bushes, in rooftops of people who would choose not to let us perish because we were born in the wrong families. We were Tutsis deemed to be cockroaches. Today, we are here remembering those we lost, but we are still here. And we still remember, and we haven't given up on the long path to justice. The struggle carries on. It's not easy, it's not simple, but it carries on anyhow. And we thank you for making this conversation part of your afternoon, because it is a very fundamental and important conversation that we didn't survive only to vanquish and disappear, but the light is still shining bright, and we carry on. So merci beaucoup, et à la prochaine. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup au premier panneau. S'il vous plaît, aidez-moi à remercier les panélistes qui nous ont éclairés sur ces sujets. Je ne sais pas si le docteur Bideli nous suit toujours, mais c'était un plaisir de voir un visage de chez nous. Et il a touché à un point très important, quand on a parlé de réparation. Il a parlé de ce qui a été fait, et il a mentionné aussi le fonds d'assistance aux rescapés du génocide, le FARG. Et justement, ça m'a interpellé parce que ce fonds d'assistance aux rescapés du génocide m'a aidé à payer mes études secondaires. Et aussi, un point très important, que le feu regretté Nason Munyandamutsa a quelque chose qu'il a dit qui est très important. Il a dit que dans un contexte post-génocide, que l'État rwandais a entrepris de mettre les pièces les unes aux autres pour recréer le pays, comme un acte de réparation aussi. Parce que sans pays, sans lieu, comment est-ce qu'on peut parler de réparation? Le deuxième panel sera composé de rescapés du génocide qui vont nous parler des défis que font face, auxquels font face les communautés, nos communautés ici au Canada. Ce panel sera modéré par Lisa Ndejulu. Lisa Ndejulu qui utilise l'art pour explorer les sentiers en quête de résilience. Est-ce que Lisa Ndejulu est prête? Kaliou.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Alors, c'est un grand honneur pour moi de pouvoir animer un panel avec les représentantes de nos associations ici, des rescapés du génocide, qui font ce travail de nous rassembler, de se tenir tout au long de l'année depuis 25 ans. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais appeler Denise Umutoni. Should I be speaking English? English, French? C'est Ottawa. Alors, a social worker by training. Denise est survivante du génocide contre les Tutsis de 1994. Elle est, she's an active community organizer avec l'association Humura de la région de Ottawa-Gatineau. Et elle travaille avec, je ne sais pas le terme pour Children's Aid Society, mais c'est le... Aide à l'enfance d'Ottawa. Voilà, merci beaucoup. Ensuite, Dr Marie-Josée Guichari, de Page Rwanda. An educator by training, Dr Guichari. Elle est survivante du génocide contre les Tutsis du Rwanda. She specializes in peace education and has initiated a project that focuses on memory transmission through writing and public engagements. En mars 2019, son premier livre, On n'oublie jamais rien, a été publié par les éditions Urtebise. Et enfin, Pamela Karambizi. Pamela est la présidente de Memory Keepers Association d'Edmonton, dont les membres sont en majorité des survivants du génocide contre les Tutsis du Rwanda, et ils habitent à Edmonton, en Alberta. Je reviens de Vancouver il y a une semaine, où il y a eu aussi une soirée pour commémorer le génocide. Normalement, je suis à Montréal, et là, à Montréal, ça fait depuis avril que c'était... bon, parlons à ces femmes merveilleuses. Alors, j'ai préparé quelques questions parce que dans mon expérience, les politiques et la recherche n'ont pas toujours eu comme priorité les besoins et les perspectives des survivants et premiers concernés. On demande souvent aux survivants de témoigner, de débuter un événement, par exemple, et de valider cet événement par leur témoignage. Mais j'aimerais que, vu qu'aujourd'hui, vous avez le dernier mot, j'aimerais beaucoup que vos préoccupations soient centrées, soient au centre des nôtres pour cet après-midi. Alors, Kwibuka25 ans, en cette fin de période de commémoration, quels ont été les défis, les réalisations et les thématiques importantes que vous avez vues et qu'est-ce que vous voyez pour la suite? So, in whichever language you prefer, nearing the end of the 100 days, what have you seen as challenges, highlights, and important themes? And what do you see going forward?
Merci. Est-ce que vous préférez en français ou en anglais ou en Kinyarwanda même?
Who does not speak French? Okay. There are people who don't speak French, so we have to speak in English.
I can mix French and English, and some few words in Kinyarwanda. Donc, la question, c'était de savoir les défis qu'on trouve comme survivants, comme dans nos associations. Je suis ici comme membre de l'association des rescapés du génocide qui opère à Ottawa-Gatineau. Je suis honorée d'avoir une voix qui peut parler, qui peut honorer nos morts, nos survivants et ceux qui ne peuvent pas parler. Je dis cela parce que ça, c'est l'un des défis que trouve Humura, c'est la transmission de la mémoire. How can we transmit the memory of our people without transmitting the hate? Sometimes, so I took my daughter for, it's an example, I took my daughter for a night where we had to sit together to remember our parents, our uncles, our neighbors, our friends, everyone who was killed during the genocide of the Tutsi of Rwanda. The first question she asked me, she said, do you speak to anyone who committed the genocide? That was the question. And I said, I don't see anyone here. Why are you asking that question? She said, when you go to Rwanda, do you see anyone who committed genocide? And when you see them, do you speak to them? I said, yeah, I do speak to them. She said, how can you talk to someone who did such thing and keep going? It was really hard, the question. And I really didn't know what to answer. And that was my first time to see the challenge on how can we talk to our children, how can we talk to the next generation without saying, yes, you need, these people did this, we have to hate them, I don't like them. Sometimes we think that as a survivor, I'm talking as a survivor, sometimes you really can't imagine how to cope and how to deal with those who did that. Mais en même temps, je voulais la rassurer que le respect mutuel, le respect des droits humains, c'est ça ce qui prime. En même temps, je ne veux pas qu'elle minimise qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait et qu'est-ce qu'ils nous ont fait. Donc, je trouve que ça, c'est un défi. Je n'ai pas encore donné la réponse à ma fille, et ça fait 2 ans. I skipped the question and changed the subject, which I believe many parents do because we don't know how and we don't know what to say. So I found that as the big challenge. The second challenge is to, based on the subject of today, it's how to know what's going on and how to work together and combat what's happening, the denial. The denial is everywhere. Like, it was the first time today I heard about the 14 cases of the people who are running and who are hiding in Canada. I might be out of the information. The information is there, but I didn't look for that information. Why? Because I probably don't get involved. I probably do my own business. I mind my own business. Je suis occupée à survivre plutôt que à regarder le problème d'ensemble. Ça, c'est un défi de survivant. Surmonter tes défis toi-même, qu'est-ce que tu es en train de vivre. Il y a la peur de parler. Il y a quelquefois tu veux même ne pas te rappeler. Et puis tu ne veux même pas savoir où se trouvent ces gens qui ont fait le mal à ton peuple. Mais en même temps, c'est cette année, je parlais à Shema, qui est le président actuel de Rumura, quand il me parlait l'autre jour d'aller participer à une activité, j'ai dit, je ne dirai jamais plus non de participer à une activité. Je ne dirai jamais non de participer à une activité de Kwibuka parce que, like Chuck said, Professor Chuck said, you are all we have, and we are all you have. Il n'y a personne qui va se rappeler de mes parents si je ne le dis pas. Il n'y a personne qui va parler des miens, qui va dénoncer qu'est-ce que Mugesera dit, que c'est la vérité. C'est pas la vérité. Le génocide, c'était un crime je trouvais que le génocide, c'était un crime de mensonge. On a étudié le mensonge. When they were talking about the education, it wasn't just the student of the killers who got that education. We did too. We have false information, and we are working with false information. So we have to detox everyone and get the real information in order to give the right memory and to say never again. So that would be my message about this challenge. Thank you.
Merci. Je pense que je dois répéter la même chose parce que finalement, on a les mêmes défis. Est-ce que je me fais bien entendre? Non? Je disais que je vais devoir peut-être répéter la même chose parce qu'on a les mêmes défis. Le premier défi et le plus gros, c'est survivre. Être un survivant, être un rescapé, c'est pas une chance. Ça me fait penser à un journaliste qui avait interviewé un rescapé qui a dit « You are a lucky man ». Ça, je me suis senti un homme chanceux. Oh. Elle a dit, tu es un homme chanceux.
You're a lucky man.
You're a lucky man. Là, j'ai pensé à moi, j'ai pensé au Rwanda, j'ai pensé aux rescapés. Je pense que les plus chanceux, ce n'est pas nous. Parce que la survivance, c'est être obligé de vivre, c'est être obligé de marcher, de travailler, de fonctionner comme les personnes normales, de mettre au monde les enfants, de les élever, d'être des citoyens, de contribuer à avancer la société et d'élever nos enfants. Et en élevant nos enfants, on doit leur transmettre les valeurs, et les bonnes valeurs, et la mémoire. Justement, ma principale préoccupation durant la commémoration, je ne me suis pas présentée, je suis membre de PAGE Rwanda, c'est l'association des parents et amis des victimes du génocide contre les Tutsis du Rwanda. Les rescapés qui étaient à Montréal se sont associés pour fonder l'association, pour se souvenir, pour se soutenir mutuellement. Donc, on a 4 objectifs. La survie, la justice, la solidarité et le souvenir et la mémoire. Donc chaque année, c'est Page Rwanda qui prépare la commémoration du génocide contre les Tutsis à Montréal et aux environs. Et cette année en particulier, 25 ans plus tard, on a tenu 3 thèmes: la mémoire et sa transmission, la santé mentale et la justice. Moi, la principale préoccupation, mon principal défi, c'est la mémoire. Bien que les autres thèmes aussi soient puissants, mais pour moi, la mémoire, c'est contre le temps. Parce que le temps file. Le temps, 25 ans, on pense que c'est hier, mais 25 ans, c'est pas hier. Ça fait 25 ans. Les personnes qui avaient 70 ans ne sont plus en vie. Les personnes qui avaient 50 ans, ça en va tranquillement. Les enfants qui sont nés pendant et après, ils ont 25 ans et plus, ou moins, mais ils sont adultes.
I will translate some of that afterwards. C'est très beau ce que tu dis, je vais traduire, je prends des notes et je traduis.
Alors, ce devoir de mémoire incombe aux survivants, aux rescapés, parce qu'ils ont vu, ils ont vécu, ils ont entendu, ils ont cette information, ils ont le devoir de laisser les traces. Quand je pense à l'histoire du Rwanda qui a été montée de toutes pièces, et nous savons jusqu'où l'histoire nous a conduit, Alors aujourd'hui, nous sommes les auteurs de notre histoire, nous sommes les acteurs d'aujourd'hui, et nous sommes là pour transmettre pour le futur. Alors pour moi, j'insiste souvent auprès des rescapés pour qu'ils laissent des traces de grâce. J'aurais aimé que mes parents écrivent ou me disent ce qu'ils ont vécu pendant les années 60, quand les premiers troubles sont arrivés. Ils étaient jeunes. Mais j'aurais aimé qu'ils me racontent. Vous savez quoi, les Rwandais, nos parents, rien. Oui. Ils ne disaient rien. Ils se protégeaient, ils nous protégeaient. Mais c'est l'information, ils sont partis avec ça. Mais nous, est-ce que nos enfants, les jeunes générations, vous voulez que nous partions puis qu'ils Mais c'est important qu'ils sachent ce que nous avons vécu. C'est très, très important. Alors, Page Rwanda organise des ateliers, souvent avec les jeunes et leurs parents, autour justement du thème de mémoire. Alors, on se met à écouter les préoccupations des uns et des autres, les questions des parents, des adultes et les questions des enfants. Les parents, on le sait, ils se protègent. Ce n'est pas tout le monde qui est prêt à parler, à s'ouvrir. Puis en même temps, ils pensent qu'ils protègent leurs enfants. Ils ne veulent pas traumatiser leurs enfants. Je pense que vous me comprenez, oui. Ou vous comprenez. Mais finalement, c'est les parents qui ne sont pas prêts. Les enfants sont prêts. Les questions qu'ils posent, tous, ils aimeraient savoir. Ils aimeraient savoir. Parce qu'ils vont chercher l'information ailleurs, vous savez. Vous savez, c'est où? Tout est là. Mais la fosse, le pire endroit pour trouver les informations, c'est sur Internet. Donc, les enfants sont prêts et puis ils veulent savoir, puis c'est leur droit. C'est les parents qui ne sont pas prêts ou qui ne savent pas comment, peut-être qu'ils ne savent pas pourquoi, qui se disent à quoi bon. Mais c'est très important. J'ai eu la chance de pouvoir écrire un livre pour raconter mon histoire, pour raconter l'histoire du Rwanda et pour raconter l'histoire de ma famille avant. J'étais adulte pendant le génocide, avant, pendant et après. là, c'est mes enfants qui sont entrés à leurs écoles de tout raconter. Mais ils sont devenus des professeurs de... C'est eux les spécialistes du génocide contre les Tutsis du Rwanda. Il y a même un copain de mon fils de 12 ans qui a fait l'exposé sur mon livre. C'est pas rien, c'est quand même... Mais c'est pas tout le monde qui a cette chance de pouvoir écrire quelque chose. C'est même pas nécessaire d'être publié. Le fait de le dire ou de l'écrire sur un bout de papier ou sur un cahier, n'importe comment, laissez-la. Ça vaut de l'or. C'est très important. À part la transmission de la mémoire, le thème que l'on aborde dans notre association est le thème qui est très important pour les membres de notre communauté, c'est la santé mentale. Cette année, nous avons eu la chance d'avoir 2 spécialistes qui ont parlé de cette problématique de la santé mentale des rescapés. C'est important parce qu'il faut qu'on se comprenne. Après le génocide, la vie a continué, comme je le disais dès le départ. Il y avait tellement de défis qu'on ne savait pas par où tirer. On pensait que le génocide était fini, que la vie allait continuer, mais la vie n'a pas continué pour tout le monde. Il y en a qui sont restés là. Ce qui est difficile, ce qui me déchire, c'est que finalement, on a constaté que les problèmes de traumatisme se transmettent de génération en génération. Moi, c'est ça que je ne voulais pas pour mes enfants. Je me disais, j'ai vraiment vécu ça, j'ai accepté ça, mais pas pour mes enfants. Mais malheureusement, il paraît que ça a été prouvé que ça se transmet à nos enfants. Donc, c'est défi de transmission de la mémoire, de santé mentale. Moi, je pense que pour l'avenir, peut-être j'anticipe, pour ce qui est à venir, ça va être vraiment ces thèmes qu'on va approfondir, qu'on va aborder, parce que la santé mentale, c'est nous, c'est notre tête, c'est notre cerveau, c'est notre vie, c'est nos enfants. Puis la mémoire, c'est ça, c'est cette transmission pour les générations à venir.
Merci. So I just wanted to I will not do justice to all of the things she said, but I just wanted to grasp some of the things that she said for those of us who don't speak English. So she was saying that she was a member of PAJ Rwanda, which is the Association of Survivors and Families of Survivors in Montreal. And she was talking about this year's commemoration themes. She was and she was talking about memory and transmission. She was talking about mental health and justice. Those were the 3 themes of this year's commemoration. And she was talking about how time flies, how time goes so quickly. 25 years ago, those who were 70 are gone. Today, she said she was lucky because she said that we are today the authors of our history, the actors of today, and we need to leave traces for tomorrow. She said she would have wished that her parents left her traces, an understanding of how things were when they were younger, but they never did. That people back then, that generation, stayed silent to protect themselves and also to protect their children. She said that she was happy or lucky. I think it's more than luck. It's hard work. She wrote a book, and And she was saying how one of her children, for example, that her children now have become the expert experts of genocide, of this genocide in their classrooms, for example, that they can just talk about it now. And she was talking about how among one of the things that the Montreal community has done is this dialogue between parents and children, and how to listen deeply to the preoccupations, the concerns of the parents and the concerns of the children, and how the young want to know, and how the parents are sometimes not ready to speak. And how important it is that we have to find, as parents, we have to find the words to tell them, because when they're ready to seek information, they will go and find it where they find it, and they might not find the one that we wish they would have, right? Because information is out there, but is it the information that we would give them? And so Marie-Josée has been encouraging survivors to leave traces. Nobody has to write a book, but maybe it's a recording, maybe it's something small that you wrote, maybe it's something you do over time, but leave a trace of your own knowledge so that those who come after you can benefit from it. She says it's worth gold. And then the other thing that she talked about was mental health, and how after the genocide life went on, but that it didn't go on for everyone, that some of the people stayed right there. And that one of the things that she's learned with the expert sort of how can I say, the expert sort of talks that we've had, that we invited into the community, was how the transmission of trauma is intergenerational. And that tears her apart, because she has always said that she can find a way through, she can accept it for herself, but she would have never wanted it for her children. And the idea that it might be necessarily intergenerational is really difficult to. And so she says that going forward, those were the themes that they were going to go deeper into. On the one hand, the transmission of memory, and on the other hand, mental health.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Is it on now? Okay, good. So I'll go ahead and answer the question as well. So speaking of the challenges, what I find more challenging right now is that even after 25 years after the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, there are still people, survivors, who can't even find, the energy to attend the commemoration. And it's still hard for them because, the moment the genocide, it's kind of brings back the memories, and it's hard for them. So, so it's not easy. And speaking of that, myself, I'm one of those who were young at the time, were kids. So we didn't understand what was going on at the time. So then going through that, I always say that our childhood was stolen away. So we didn't get a chance to be children because we had to learn how to be adults before it was time. And growing up, it wasn't easy because I think while the other people, other kids of our age were kids, we are acting like adults. And also, let's not forget about those kids who lost their parents during the genocide. Here we are 25 years later. As one of the speakers mentioned, it's 25 years later, but it still feels like it was yesterday. Think about those who were young and who happened to lose everybody in their families growing up. They had to take care of themselves. They had, sometimes you hear those who say, they had to go to school and they had to keep up with school or whatever they had to do, even though it was hard for them. And of course, the memory is there. The flashbacks are there. The trauma is still there. But no matter what, they had to keep going. So that wasn't easy at all. And getting back to the fact that we have to actually let the new generation know what happened. So I think we don't have a choice when it comes to that. Because of course, how can you explain to a kid, let's say for people, like for somebody who happened to lose everybody in their family, you have a kid asking you, where is my grandparents? Where are my grandparents? Where are my cousins and aunts and uncles? What are you gonna give as an answer? So at the end of the day, I think you have to tell them the truth, even though the truth hurt, but I think it's better for them to know than not knowing, and then you never know. By not knowing, it might cause other issues in the future. So to me, I would prefer them to know today, and then they don't have to deal with that later. And so you asked me about the highlights. So where I come from in Edmonton, we were lucky enough. We have a project that we are working on right now with two professors of university, Dr. Linda and Dr. Sophie. The project is about basically recording testimonies. We are encouraging the survivors of the genocide to share their testimonies. Why? Because where do we see ourselves or the new generation 25 years like from today or 50 years? So we need to share. I know it's not easy, it's really hard, but we have to share what we went through so that they will get to know exactly what happened. So also, but the good thing about the project is that they can record your testimony, but it's your choice to share it with everybody. So you can just choose to keep it for yourself, and when you feel like you're ready to share it, then you can go ahead and do it. But if you don't feel like sharing it, then you can just keep it for yourself. And to me, that's really good, especially that nowadays the panel before us, they spoke about how the denial of the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. That's a good thing, because if they're out there talking, speaking about the genocide, or even some of them, they even say that it was like a double war or something, that the people killed each other. So then if we don't speak out, how are we going to prove that actually they're lying? What they're saying is a lie. So that's why we have to actually fight back and prove, like give facts that the genocide happened, and not only it happened in 1994, the killing started from long time ago. It's just like in 1994, it was like a mass killing, and then it was highlighted more than the previous killings. And and the good thing, what I can say is like, speaking of the new generation, I was really impressed this year during the commemoration. We had so many people from the new generation attending the commemoration ceremonies, and they were even asking what they can do to help. So they were really involved. Then that gives me hope that they are starting to understand, and they feel that it's their responsibility also to get involved. And because tomorrow they have to be there to make sure it doesn't happen again to their generation or the generations after, or even anywhere else in the world. So that's a good thing. That's something to really appreciate. So yeah. But I think also, like you mentioned, you asked about, like speaking of the challenges. Yes, one of the speakers mentioned that, like, the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which is also a problem, and the challenge is also that we don't get to talk about that. Like, what was one of the consequences is like the mental health, like the mental illness, the trauma, the post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think it's time to actually now speak out, to talk to people, get to know what kind of help they need and what we can do for them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so that's what I think I can say.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think it's really important on that question of mental health. I've witnessed a young survivor who's training to be a helping professional, and he had a conflict in his training with colleagues, and it got escalated, and he sort of lost his resources, and he broke down, and because of his past, because his past is known, people are more wary of what a breakdown for him might mean than they would be for someone else, right? And so what happens is then that the survivor, as almost a site of violence, becomes then sort of there's a switch that happens, as though the violence was within that person. Like there's a, you know, nobody understands what the depths that survivors go through other than other survivors. And so it becomes almost this other, there's almost this other sort of quality about it, right? But then that also means that if something is wrong, oh my goodness, what could it be? And this is something that makes it so that people can doubt your judgment, which is, I don't know, I found it the height of injustice. That is flipping, that is making the victim of something responsible for something that they are not. And since, as a survivor, you yourself, you don't know, you also have been the site of this violence. And you need, how can I say, it's so unhelpful to be looked at with this doubt. You need reassurance. You don't need that doubt, right? Anyways, I've been thinking about it and how to sort of advocate for that sort of thing, to make sure that we don't confuse things, that we don't flip things, be it in cases of a parent, for example, right? Is a parent a more fragile parent because they're a survivor? No. Like, mental health is something that concerns everybody, right? And so it should not be that a survivor is seen to be more fragile as someone else. I find it like there's something, I find it the height of, bon. In terms of the relation to justice and memory, I think that we spoke to it a bit, but I think I would like to speak to, we've been able to, over the years, create collaborations. Survivor associations have been able to create really important collaborations, be it with universities. I'm thinking of Concordia University in particular. I'm thinking of McGill as well in Montreal. There are others here in Ottawa. In Edmonton, Pamela, you were talking about. So there are universities. There are sort of individual profs that have been like really close collaborators and allies. And there's also been, so I'm thinking about memory in particular, but institutions, like Canadian institutions that have collaborated and really centered survivors' concerns. I'm thinking here about the Pier 21 Museum in Halifax that just had the loss exhibition. Whoops. We don't have a lot of time left. That just had the loss exhibition, but I'm also thinking about the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, right? That also has been thinking about thinking about justice and so on. And so I'm wondering about if you have any last words around justice and memory in particular.
Since we have a few minutes, I won't be long, so I can give you time to express yourself too. About justice, I was talking about getting involved and know what's going on. Like the previous panel was talking about the 14 cases. It really got to me to know that I didn't know, even though I get involved in every single memorial event that happened since I came to Canada. I took that as my personal responsibility to get more involved, to get to know what's going on in my community and how I can be, I can work better with the institutions that are around. This morning I was thinking about this. I say, we do have Rwanda Day sometimes. We get Rwandans from North America and we get together, we plan, we get strategies how to work with our partners in our countries, in our provinces, in our local government, and in Rwanda too. How about a symposium of the genocide survivors? We never get together. Like I know there's Page Rwanda in Montreal, and there's Edmonton, there's other association in other provinces. We can't combat denial if we don't know where the people are. Maybe people in Montreal, they know what's going on. Maybe we can have a collaboration and meet once a year, have a big symposium of East or West or the whole country, even international, go meet Synergie in Rwanda, Kwibuka France, Belgique, they are more advanced than us. Have that way we can have a strategy on how to work on the future goals, like how to tackle the issue of denial, how to tackle the issue of mental health, how the people in France or Belgium or Edmonton. I remember when I started the Association of Survivors in Calgary, I was new, I didn't speak English, I didn't know anything, but I was like, no, I just came from Rwanda, we need to remember the genocide in Calgary. People were like, huh? Is it Rwanda near Jamaica? They didn't even know where is it Rwanda. So I think the collaboration and collaboration with the High Commission that invited us today to work together towards same goals. That way, even the people who have a louder voice on Internet, comme tu disais, ils parlent plus que nous. Je parlais de detox. We will not do the detox if we don't have the facts and the right information. And we can't just side with what we believe, what we want to believe. like I said, they didn't take that education alone. We took the bad information too. Sometimes I say something, I'm like, huh? Doesn't make any sense right now, since according to what I lived, what I saw, but that's what my teachers taught me when I was young. Our parents, you said, they didn't tell us the information. The mayor of my district, who killed my entire family, until I was 14, I thought he was my dad's brother. Because they used to tell, go to uncle this, uncle, I thought he was my uncle. Then I got to know he wasn't. So we need that collaboration, that meeting, the sharing of information, and get involved. We talked about reparations. The réparation. There's not even a fund. There's not even, okay, let's say, je pense c'est messieurs, c'est Robert Petit qui parlait du fonds pour mettre des fonds pour les réparations. Well, that's the first time I hear that. Nous, les survivants, so the crime of genocide, I say, it's based on a lie, and people transform the information, and the victims, they become the horrible people. Therefore, the now accused, they are like, we have to defend ourselves. We need to take that responsibility to say, okay, this is the fund now for reparations. Therefore, whoever takes responsibility, the moral responsibility we're talking about, knows where to send those funds. It's us. We have to do that. I don't think I'm going to expect France to do that. I'm not going to expect Belgium to do that. I'm not going to expect someone who probably participated in a genocide to do that. But as Denise, maybe I can start the talk with my association. Then we have that. And we have, like Professor Chuck said, you are all we got. So we need your support. We need support from everyone. That would be my last words. Thanks.
La mémoire et la justice, ça va comme ça. Parce que la justice a besoin de la mémoire.
Memory and justice are like this because memory serves justice.
Parce que les témoignages, les preuves, les traces, c'est des preuves en justice. Je ne suis pas spécialiste en justice, mais la justice a besoin de traces pour exister, a besoin de témoins. C'est pour ça qu'il faut faire vite avant qu'on nous disparaisse, avant qu'on oublie. Est-ce que la justice sert la mémoire? Absolument. Absolument. Parce que tous ces écrits, tous ces processus, toutes ces démarches, c'est toute une série d'informations. Même Gachacha, il en a parlé, Videli. Tout est écrit, tout est compilé. Donc la justice sert la mémoire et la mémoire sert la justice. C'est un beau couple en fait.
So justice serves memory and memory also serves justice.
I think since I'm speaking last, I don't remember, was that a question or it's just like
Those were last words
okay.
Around justice and memory. These are today's themes from your perspectives.
Yeah, for me, for the justice, yeah, I'll say I really appreciate how far our country has come in terms of justice, reconciliation. But we can't forget the fact that for some of the survivors, it's still like a long way to go, especially that we know some of us, some of the survivors, are still even searching for the bodies of their loved ones who were murdered during the genocide against Tutsi. So it's not easy. And one day I was during this commemoration period, I watched a video of a lady who was giving testimony in Rwanda, and she mentioned something that is really that caught my attention. She said, during the genocide, I didn't know that one day I will be sitting here to answer questions or to tell you what I went through, because at that time the plan was to basically like kill every single Tutsi in Rwanda. So we have to understand also that, like the fact that the survivors, most of us are not prepared to speak out, to share our testimonies, because like this is not like a movie, it's a reality. You know, it's something we went through. So we are taking baby steps, and I hope like the international community or they keep up with us. But I also like there's something I really wanna highlight here. Like I always hear when we talk about the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, we simply mention genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, but by who? You know, that's the question, by who? We never say, like, I mean, it's a really, I don't hear many times making it clear that it was the genocide committed by the extremist Hutus against Tutsis. I think that has also to be clear, because like, even if you meet people from other communities and they happen to know that you are from Rwanda, some of them will ask you, oh, but what happened? Who killed who? Yeah, there was a genocide. So then they stop there was a genocide. So I think we have to really say things as they are, to make sure that we make it clear, not only for us Rwandans, but for also the international community to know, because again, when we do, especially here in Canada or any other countries, when we commemorate and when we do the Walk to Remember, the purpose behind is to let the world know, and also to make sure that we are basically passing the message that, yes, we went through that, but we don't wish this to happen anywhere else. So it's also, it would be also good that we really make it clear and make sure that our message goes the way we mean to pass it. So also, let's talk about like those who get released from jail, from prison, those who committed genocide. I think sometimes it's hard for the survivors to deal with, because you imagine that person who killed some of your family members and you are just there by yourself, and the same person is gonna be your neighbor, you know? How do you think it's gonna feel to live with that person? And I also saw like some testimonies from those who committed genocide, sharing basically their testimonies also, like what they did basically. I wonder, like, is that helpful for the survivors? For like, especially like when it comes to April, and there was this video from one of the prisoners who was sharing like what he did during the genocide, how he killed people, and he would describe every single thing about what he did. So it's still hard. It's really hard to hear, and I can imagine when that person is actually talking about your family, how or what he did to them. So for that reason, my wish is that we create a plan on how we're gonna deal with the consequences, especially if that happened to affect people, especially the survivors, what are we planning to do? And that comes to the plan for the mental health, for the mental, for the trauma, for the flashbacks, for the post-traumatic stress disorder. So what's the plan? What are we planning to do? And by concluding, I really encourage that we work on that. It's a good thing that we commemorate those who are gone, but also what are we doing for those who are here now? What are we doing for them? And that to me is something to really work on and make sure that, because I don't know if you heard, we happened to hear even those who were suffering in silence, and they ended up, some of them would end up taking their lives, and nobody knew they were going through whatever they were going through. And so that's really sad to hear. So I wish we could really think ahead and plan in case things like that happen. What are we planning to do?
So
Thank
plans,
you.
thank you.
Yeah.
I know that the MC has given me 5 minutes, so maybe one question from you. There's not a lot. Yes, he thinks he's going to speak in French.
Vous avez parlé des défis 25 ans après. C'est sûr que les défis des rescapés après 25 ans sont multiples. Vous avez parlé de justice, de mémoire, de santé mentale et plus. Pour le moment, au Rwanda, comme à l'extérieur du Rwanda, on fait face à un défi nouveau du pouvoir démolarisant des hommes et des femmes d'église, pour ne pas dire des sectes de religion. Quand on parle de justice, il renvoie le processus à la perspective eschatologique, dissuadant leurs ouailles de poursuivre en justice les auteurs du génocide, prétendant que Dieu est le seul juge. En termes de mémoire, abapfuye barangije urwabo, nimwirebe, mubababarire, muve mu rwango, mutazarimbuka. Il menace les survivants de brûler en enfer s'ils ne pardonnent pas aux bourreaux qui ne présentent même aucune trace de repentance. Négationnisme. Il idolise le génocide, prétendant que le nôtre est tué durant le Tutticide l'ont été parce que c'était de la volonté de Dieu. Tout ce qui nous arrive, vous savez, c'est inscrit dans les plans de Dieu. Et leur discours arrive à 2 doigts de la sanctification des criminels du génocide qui, selon l'ordre de conséquence, n'ont fait que la volonté de Dieu. Imana yarabahamagaye, donc hari Imana yatumye.
Oh my goodness.
Côté santé mentale, un survivant qui présente des problèmes de santé mentale, on dit qu'il est possédé. Et par quoi? Par des démons. Et il faut prier pour lui. Yahanzweho. Pour eux, aucune aide psychologique n'est nécessaire. Seules les prières, seule la foi peuvent sauver ces malheureux rescapés. Comment faire face à ce défi?
Ouf.
Je vous lance la question, merci.
As a genocide survivor myself, I don't really know how to answer that question, so that's a challenge for everyone. We are, as you said, I don't even think it was a question, it was like a statement, an observation that... je peux répondre en français, la question était en français. Je m'excuse. On m'a dit à l'école, si une question est en français, tu réponds en français. Ou en anglais, OK. donc, je disais que c'était un défi c'était comme une observation que vous avez faite. Et puis, c'est que c'est très dommage que le pouvoir religieux, maintenant, c'est comme, je trouvais, moi, c'était comme un refoulement. C'est comme un refoulement. Moi-même, après le génocide, j'ai exploré toutes les religions. J'ai été dans les Bahaïs, j'ai été chez les musulmans, j'ai été chez les autres qui portent le foulard. C'était les adventistes, non, pas adventistes, j'étais chez les adventistes, les pentecôtes. J'explorais toutes les religions because I didn't know which God really allowed what happened to happen. Je ne savais pas c'était quel Dieu, je voulais savoir, et puis c'est quel Dieu qui aurait été mieux que les autres. I didn't find any. C'était un refoulement de moi-même, de refouler mes problèmes, parce que je croyais à une puissance plus que moi qui peut aider. Et je trouve que d'une part, c'est l'aide de... Tu n'as rien, tu n'as plus personne. Tu as juste la foi et je trouve que c'est la seule chose qui a peut-être aidé quelques gens à pouvoir sortir de leur maison. C'est comme, I have nothing, I have no one, maybe there is a bigger force than me that will help me. C'est un refuge parce que we have nothing. So those people who are using the survivors to pass another message, that's our job to change the facts. We have to show the real facts. I can see the MCs there already. C'est notre travail de donner les vrais faits parce que they talk so loud, we have to be louder. Thank you. Je m'excuse, j'ai pris tout le temps.
Est-ce que vous aviez des mots à ajouter à la question?
Moi, j'allais dire que je pense que ça doit être réglé par le pouvoir au Rwanda. C'est l'autorité qui devrait, c'est la police ou je ne sais pas. Il faut une intervention forte de la police.
Ça se passe même ici. Il y a des religions qui empêchent les gens de venir dans les commémorations pour dire, oh non, 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 non. Don't believe, you don't have to pray for those who are dead, so don't go there. Donc, c'est même ici, c'est ça le problème. Oui.
Excusez-moi. Je pense que...
Là, elle a juste un petit...
Yeah, so I think it was a comment, but at the same time it was a question. Speaking of the churches, Bible, let's not forget the fact that during the genocide, those who were killing, they used the Bible too. Mm-hmm. They were using the Bible. And they could prove to you that whatever they are doing is written in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And that was a proof for them to do whatever they were doing. So then to come back and then use the same Bible or churches or prayers and say that we are not supposed to judge those who committed the genocide, that we just have to wait and let God do his job. Honestly, to me, I take it as also a kind of trauma because it's like denial. Yeah, it's a denial because you don't want to face the truth, you don't want to face the reality. Instead, you choose just to go behind the wall that we call, I would say, prayers, and then you just basically choose to hide there and act like basically nothing happened. You have to keep going, but the way you keep going, that's the question. How are you doing? And most of the time, you will find those who say those words, they are not doing well, not at all. It's, I won't say that they're using it as an excuse. No, it's not an excuse, because they won't use that as an excuse when they lost most of their family members, you know? And as one of my colleagues say that they deserve to actually be, I don't know, facing the justice or whatever. Actually, to me, I actually think they actually need help. They need help. They need someone to go and really help them, you know? Because if you look, like, until now, when it comes to mental health, it's still a stigma. To go see a specialist or anybody who would help you with any kind of mental illness, you will make sure nobody sees you going there. You don't want anybody to know. So that itself is a problem, you know? And to me, I think because that is still a stigma, that's why people choose to go behind religions, because at least there that we go and talk or whatever, and, you know, they are free to express themselves. Either they are right or wrong. But I think it comes back to the mental health.
Donc, comme je disais, il nous faut une autre conférence pour donner plus de temps aussi au public de donner son point de vue, d'échanger sur ces questions qui sont très importantes. J'aimerais, pour clôturer, mentionner la présence de M. Jacques Frémont, recteur de l'Université d'Ottawa. C'est un honneur de vous avoir ici aujourd'hui. Et la présence de la députée sénatrice Yasmine Ransin. Sénatrice. Excusez-moi. Aussi, la présence de l'ambassadeur Kosovo, and the Jamaica High Commission. Thank you very much for being with us. So again, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking our speakers and moderators of the two sessions. Those were some very, very compassionate and uplifting words they shared with us. So I hope you found this international conference insightful and useful. J'ai pas l'ombre d'un doute que vous avez trouvé cette conférence très intéressante et très éducative. Sans toutefois tarder, c'est la fin. Merci beaucoup d'avoir pris votre après-midi pour être avec nous. Si vous reste encore un petit peu de temps, nous avons un petit cocktail à la fin. Donc ne partez pas si vous avez encore du temps. Please, there is a reception at the end of this conference. If you still have time, stay with us. And it will be an opportunity to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.